Hey, what's up, Logos American History students? It is Monday, June 29th, 2020. Happy Monday. Happy start to week 4 of term 6. That's right, we are more than halfway through term 6 now. I can see the finish line of term 6, the finish line of our 2019-2020 school year, which feels like it's been going on forever and ever and ever. Um, it's been a long year, and we're almost into July now. So before we know it, we'll be done with this school year, and we'll be thinking about summer break, and then coming back for the 2020-2021 school year in August. That's crazy to say that, but that's where we're at. But we still have some work to do before we get to the end of the term. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's go ahead and get into our Blackbaud. Get out of here and go into Blackbaud. There we are on the class page for Blackbaud. Whether you're in 6th hour American history or 4th hour American history, it's the same class. Doesn't really matter the hour because we're not at school, right? But we'll always start off here on the bulletin board page where you'll see the e-learning instructions as always, right? Especially that message about the Zoom meetings on Thursday. We had a great Zoom meeting this past Thursday. Hopefully we have another great one this Thursday. This Thursday will be the last day of the week. It's a shortened week because of the Independence Day holiday, 4th of July. So yeah, we got a long weekend, meaning we got a short week this week, short week next week, and we got a short week the week after that, and that's it. That's the end of the school year. So it's going to be, flying by the time over the next 3 weeks. We do want to make sure we cover, we still got some material to cover. When we left off last week, we were talking about the 1980s. I'm excited for this week because we're going to be starting talking about the 1990s, and that's like my decade, right? That's the decade that I was born in the 80s, but I grew up, became an adult in the 90s. And so that's kind of my coming of age decade. That's the decade I remember. That's the pop culture references from the 1990s. I remember all of them, right? I grew up on Nickelodeon and MTV, so I love the 90s. But before we get to the 90s, we got to finish up the 80s, and we want to finish up the last president of the 1980s. We've been talking a lot about Reagan, but if we go into our topics tab and we go into the 1980s, we will see today's reading, Chapter 26, Section 4, the download's right there. Let's go ahead and click the download, and we will see. So Ronald Reagan, as we learned last week, was elected to 2 presidential terms, and then at the end of his second term, we need a new president, and his vice president, George H.W. Bush, ran and was elected president, right? So Ronald Reagan's vice president succeeded him as president in the 1988 presidential election. So George H.W. Bush, and we call him George H.W. Bush to distinguish him from George W. Bush, his son, who also served as president of the United States after George H.W. Bush. The H.W. stands for Herbert Walker. And George Bush Sr., George Bush, the 41st president, like I said, before he was president, he was the vice president under Ronald Reagan for 2 terms. Before that, he was the director of the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. He was also the director of the Republican National Party. He had a lifetime in politics and public service. He served in World War II. So he's been around. He passed away just a couple years ago in 2018. But this section's all about his presidency. It only lasted 1 term, right? So he only gets 1 section. Reagan got, 3 sections of the chapter. Bush gets 1 because he only served 1 term. And again, this is weird for me because he's the first president that I actually remember, right? I was alive for Reagan, but I don't remember him. I was too young. But I remember Bush getting elected, and I remember the Bush presidency. I remember these major world events. We had so many major world events happen during the Bush presidency. It wasn't necessarily him doing it. He just happened to be president when it happened. But the Berlin Wall, which separated communist East Berlin from non-communist West Berlin, came down. And the separation between East Germany and West Germany disappeared. There's no more East and West Germany after the Bush presidency. Again, Bush didn't do that. That just happened while he was president. Also happened, the fall of the Soviet Union happened during the Bush presidency. All these communist nations, communism goes away. The Cold War ends, right, during the Bush presidency. That's a huge deal. Tiananmen Square happened in China, right, whereas communism ended everywhere in the world. When students protested in China trying to end communism there, the communists killed them all. They sent tanks and troops into Tiananmen Square, where hundreds of protesters had gathered to peacefully protest, and they opened fire on them and ran over them with tanks. And it was all televised because it was the 1980s, and Bush really didn't do anything about it. Not that he could necessarily. And then the Persian Gulf War, right, which was the first, incursion by U.S. troops, wouldn't be the last, into the Middle East, right, Southwest Asia. This occurred in Kuwait and Iraq and Saudi Arabia, so over there in the Arabian Peninsula. And it was again the first of several wars that would be fought over oil, really. But it was a victory, and it was a short war, and it was a limited conflict. It was called Operation Desert Storm, and it lasted 6 weeks, and then it was over, right? But then also the economy was not very good during Bush's presidency, and that led to him losing his re-election bid. So that's the Bush section. We do have some reading questions to go along with that, and as always, you'll find those back on Blackbaud. There they are, embedded right here as a Google form. You can always answer using the Google Forms, or you can go to the Assignments tab. You'll find them right there under the Assignments tab. Also under the Assignments tab, you'll find the question of the day. So let's take a look at this question of the day. I mentioned the 1988 election, where George H.W. Bush was elected president, was the first time that I paid attention to who the president was and who was elected president. And ever since, I was in kindergarten in 1988 when that election happened. And every election since then, I've paid attention, and I've cared who won. I didn't have a vote until 2000, right? The election of 2000 was the first time I was old enough to vote, but I voted in every election since then. And even before then, I was paying attention, right? I'm not saying that, you need to be like me, but I do think that, again, I want to know what your opinion is on the question of the day. How much do you think it matters who the president is? I happen to think it matters very much. Does it make any difference to you, though, whether the president is a Republican or a Democrat, right? So this is your answer. There's no right or wrong answer. You don't got to agree with me. But I think, this is 2020. This is an election year. It is an important year, believe it or not. And I think that, the apathy that I've seen in recent years when it comes to our elections and our political leaders, I think that's what our political leaders want. They want us to think that it doesn't matter and that we shouldn't care, so that they can just do whatever they want, right? But in a democracy, the people need to care. The people need to participate. Otherwise, we don't have a democracy. And maybe that doesn't matter to you. But I want to know what you guys think. How much do you think it matters who the president is? And, it's funny. Ever since they updated how we do assignments in Blackbaud, it's been kind of a pain in the butt. This link, which was on one of the questions of the day a long time ago, won't go away. I can't get rid of it. It's just there for every question of the day, I guess, for the rest of the school year. Good news is it's a good link. I like this website. Remember, this website shows us all the presidential elections in history, right? We can go back and look at all the presidential elections and look at the map. And remember, the red states are the Republican one. The blue states are the Democratic one, candidate one. And you can see, right? I mentioned 1988, right here. That was the first presidential election that I paid attention to. In 1988, all the red states went for George H.W. Bush. The blue states went for Michael Dukakis. And in our little kindergarten class presidential election, I voted for Bush. I liked Bush because his name reminded me of the brand of beer that my dad liked to drink. I was a kindergarten. I didn't know. My parents, they supported Dukakis because my dad was a union worker. And Democrats support union workers. Republicans support big business, right? And so that's why my family, my parents, I grew up in a Democratic voting household because of how my parents made a living, right? That was the main factor for that, right? And again, I started paying more and more attention. By 1992, 4 years later, I was supporting Bush's opponent, who went on to win, Bill Clinton, right? Bill Clinton won again in 1996, and you can see how he won, right? The states that went blue in 1996 went for Bill Clinton. The states that went red went for the Republican, a guy named Bob Dole, and Clinton won. In 2000, even though it doesn't look very close, that was one of the closest elections in history. Al Gore, the Democrat, got more popular votes, but the Republican, George Bush Jr., won in 2000. And again, that was the first election that I got to vote in, and I paid very much attention, and I voted for Al Gore. 2004, I voted again against George W. Bush, and again, George W. Bush won. 2008, Barack Obama. 2012, Barack Obama again, and there's 2016, Donald Trump. Those are the maps. That's Donald Trump's map in 2016. What will the map look like in 2020? And does it matter? You tell me. Answer the question of the day. Answer those reading questions. As always, if you have any concerns or questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a good day. See you there. Peace.